All right. What's up, Austin? How are you, man? First one in for the night, dude. What's up, Stick? Welcome in. So game plan. How you been, man? What's up, Mike? Um, what's up, Joe? Welcome in. So game plan tonight. We're going to talk a little bit about just to briefly talk about Judaism. We're going to talk about some Zionism, pre 1947, right? And then Thursday night we'll come back and we'll talk about the part two. So this is going to be part one of two parts for the week. But we'll kind of hang out for a second, let a few people roll through. What's up, Cookie? How you doing? Long time no see, Joe. Exactly, man. It's been a minute. My heart was aching, but now that I see you here, all is better. Thank you, Cookie. Appreciate that. But yeah, game plan. Talk about Zionism. Real quick, as people are kind of coming in, I think it's important to also just put some context onto all this right now with what's going on. And these are just some quick numbers as of January for the most part. So obviously a lot's happened this last week as Israel has broken the ceasefire, right, and re-engaged in its bombing campaigns. So remember, Palestine we're talking about, and I'm only talking specifically about Gaza, right, but in general, Palestine we're talking about 2.3 million people, right, nearly 50% of which are children. We're talking about 92% of housing units have been damaged, 80% of commercial facilities have been damaged, almost 70% of cropland has been damaged. At least half the hospitals are only partially functioning. 68% of road networks are damaged. 88% of school buildings have been damaged. And this was just, again, as of January, right? Over 200 journalists have been killed since this all began, 10/7, right? We're talking about over 61,000 people that have been killed. And that's an undercount, like without doubt, right? Because there's still people that haven't been identified, found, right, beneath the rubble and things like this. So that's kind of what we have to keep in mind right now. This week alone, just in the last few days, right, as Israel has broken the ceasefire, right, as they've decided to do this, we're talking about already 700 more have been killed this week alone. So we're not here to debate what's happening, right? These are the facts. This is easy information to find. It's out there. It's not debatable. If this is the type of thing that you're bothered by or you don't like, get the fuck out, man. Right? Go hang out in your little fucking fake ass, little just anti-human rights, just anti-fucking decency circles. I don't got time for it. So when we're looking at Zionism, let's remember that this is a political project that has been around for 130 years. Okay? When we're talking about Judaism, the religion, we're talking about something that's been around for almost 4,000 years. All right, that's a staggering difference. So even the conflation of this political Zionism, right, this project of colonialism, because where was it born? Europe, 1800s, right? What's going on this time? A lot of nationalistic movements, right? We can think of a few, okay? And we have to remember that the climate in Europe is severely anti-Semitic, right? So the idea of Zionism, if we don't think about the application, and we're going to talk more about it, because in application it has been unequivocal ethnic cleansing and unequivocal genocide. Not a debate. If we look at the concept and how we got there, right, we're talking about the 1800s. There's a lot of fucking anti-Semitism. We know even in the last century what happened, right? There's without doubt a stunning amount of anti-Semitism, and I think anyone would have to be really disingenuous not to acknowledge that, okay? But that doesn't mean we can conflate anti-Semitism, right, with valid critiques of Israel, a state, an entity that has behavior, right? We criticize states, we criticize countries, we criticize governments all the time, right? So when we're looking at Zionism, we have to remember we're not talking about Judaism. We're not talking about even the, well, we are, but we're not talking about Jewish people even necessarily, because even when you look at the history of Zionism, there have been a lot of groups, right, within Jewish societies that have opposed Zionism, right? A lot of Orthodox Jews have opposed Zionism, right? A lot of reformist Jewish people have opposed Zionism, right? There's a lot of people within Israel that oppose Zionism still to this day, right? You can't help where you're born. So I think that's kind of important to remember. But Zionism can kind of be attributed to Theodor Herzl, and if I butcher his name, I apologize. He was an Austrian journalist, right? He's considered by many to be the father of modern Zionism. And again, I think that there's a validity to what we're trying to do here if we're looking at Zionism in the perspective of anti-Semitism in Europe at the time and trying to find a way to protect this group of people, right? But the idea that in protection of this group of people, even in the aftermath of something as horrible as World War II and the Holocaust, that we could just displace more people, right? And we could just replace them, get rid of them from their homeland, right? Inflict violence upon them in the creation of something else is in the most basic of senses this idea that two wrongs make a right. And I think like even children can understand how that doesn't fucking work. So it's a really strange thing. And as my friend said before we got here, in terms of like, just think about U.S. language, like Israel's not some like long been here, like historical, like established fucking thing in like the human collective psyche. It's a fucking relatively new thing. It's like a boomer. In terms of the timeline of human existence, it's a boomer. Shout out Shy, right? So, and she's 100% correct on that. And so that should give you some perspective that this thing that so many people hold as like this near and dear fucking established truth is not. It's a political project that happened because of the British Mandate, right? The end effects of World War II, even the end effects of World War I, obviously, right? And the fall of the Ottoman Empire and shit like that. And I'm not here to fucking play pro-Ottoman Empire, right? Because you could talk about genocide there of the Armenian people, for example. But we have to acknowledge that I believe it is 1914, one of the final census counts of the Ottoman Empire. If you look at the area, let me get the number right just so I don't fuck this up. 85% at the time are Muslim Arabs, right? In this area that we now call Israel. 85% of people are Muslim Arabs. Then you have the Balfour Declaration, right, during the kind of end times of World War One, as things are starting to kind of get towards the end. And that's this idea that the British Empire is like, you know what we're going to do? We are going to put the Jewish people in Palestine. That's what we're going to do. Before they even have the land, this is what they're going to do. Fall of World War One, British Mandate pops up by 1922, and now you have an explicit attempt to kind of create this settler colonial like project, right, and lay the ground for it. And you have the legalization of Jewish-only settlements, right? Again, remember at 1914, you're talking about a population that's 85% Arab Muslim and only 5% Jewish. This is 1914. 3 years later, Great Britain's like, you know what? We're going to put you guys there on top of them. And that was the goal until the point by 1947, through settler projects and attempts and laws and things of this nature, you have only 67% Arab Muslims and about 30% Jewish people, right? And that's because this project didn't just start in 1947, right? It goes back in time. So that's really important to understand when we're just talking about Zionism, when we're talking about Israel, when we're looking at these things, when we're looking at these outcomes. Maybe we can talk about the merits of Zionism, but we can't talk about the merits of it in application because it required ethnic cleansing. It required us to get rid of a group of people that had been in this region for centuries on centuries, really millennia, right? And again, most of this is just non-debatable. So you deterred people from voting for Joe. I voted for Kamala Harris, Haley. So something that's really strange is to jump into a live, assume some things, because obviously the topic of Palestine is very triggering for you, and you just go, you're why we lost the election. No, Democrats lost the election because they ran a terrible fucking product, right? They are entitled, and this mixture of elitism, entitlement, and civility politics is awful. It's an awful fucking brand. That's not appealing. And I still voted for it because Donald Trump 2.0 is that fucking bad. But you guys lose your fucking minds when people inject any level of morality or ethics into the conversation about electoralism. And you become a motherfucking nationalist when you make comments like you do. Like, just straight up. So just don't say anything, or just go somewhere where people don't give a fuck about your depraved fucking takes because you can't handle fucking history, bro. What I will deter people from doing is voting from people like him again, though, because of people like you who refuse to take any fucking accountability and are never going to get it. That's what I'm going to fucking do. Because I'm sick of fucking aligning with you motherfuckers who will never actually promote people. You just fucking show up once every 4 years and you think that's enough. You did something. Fucking trash, bro. I'm not even anti-electoralism. I just think that the inability to even talk about direct action, things like mutual aid, right, organizing within your community, like, it's just... What's up, Kev? How you doing, man? But yeah, that was the main shit I really want to talk about, and just in terms of kind of laying the stage, right? Balfour Declaration is an important thing to remember from 1917. Kind of remember the differences in the census count, because when you're talking to people, right, there's a lot of just foul-ass Zionists. Give them the census counts, let them know, right, no, this doesn't check, right? You can look at British policy post-1922, right, to facilitate this shit. Thursday night, we'll talk more about post-1948, starting with really 1947, honestly, is where we're going to start. But yeah, I'll open it up now. Topic this live is it really is anti-Zionism, if we're being direct and to the point. I'm at the point where I'm not even sure if I can recognize the state of Israel personally, which opens up the whole new set of questions about, well, what other states can you or can't you recognize, right? Because then we got to talk about the United States of America. Dude, I hate mosquitoes with a fucking passion. Um, I voted for Kamala simply because she isn't Trump, but she's just as much, yeah. And so that's kind of the difficulty, right? If you take a big enough step back, right? And what you got to remember is we live in a time where the predominant economic mode is capitalism, right? No one denies that shit. And who's at the heart of that? The United States of America. And then when you consider the kind of global economy and how things kind of move, right? The dollar's at the heart of that. Our currency, right? Ain't that fucking convenient, right? There's a reason why post World War II, when the United States of America accounts for anywhere from 25 to 50% of global GDP, that's a pretty big range, right? But at minimum 25%, right? You got over half the world's infrastructure blown to pieces, right? American corporations are in an amazing position to help the world rebuild and kind of lay the stage for itself. And then there's a reason why, as the World Bank, the International Monetary Fund, right, the UN come together, we have motherfucking veto power outright with the IMF and the World Bank. And that's gotten closer to being kind of a yoinked over time, because like we're like only around like 16% now. If you drop below 15%, you lose your outright veto power. But on the UN, the United States of America, France, England, China, and Russia got outright veto power. So anytime you see a resolution or some shit within the UN that's like, hey, don't do this shit, especially as it relates to Israel, for example, resolution or some shit within the UN that's like, hey, don't do this shit, especially as it relates to Israel, for example, the US can just be like, yeah, that's great, veto, right? We don't fucking care. So we're at a really interesting time. Because one thing I kind of struggle with is I think that liberals, and I've talked about this a lot this week, liberals are so great. They get it for a second. There's a second in time where you motherfuckers show an amazing level of consciousness, right? It's when MAGA loves to play their Make America Great Again card. And then what do you motherfuckers say in response? You get it because you're like, well, when was America ever great? Huh? Tell me, tell me, tell me. And they can't answer the fucking question, right? Without overtly attaching themselves to obvious, cruel, systematic bigotry of some form. Right? But the second you had your little gotcha moment, they did fucking nothing because they turn around and do the same shit, right? They just fucking scratched their head a few times, then moved the fuck on and went right back to what they were doing. You had your gotcha moment, you turn back around, and then you wrap yourselves up in the same motherfucking aesthetics. You still like the USA. Y'all still fucking wrap yourselves up in the red, white, and blue. You still promote the institutions. You're still pro-military. You're still pro-military industrial complex. You're still pro-U.S. foreign policy. You're still pro-fucking banks. You're still pro-fucking stock market and Wall Street. You're still pro-fucking prisons and shit. Like, I don't know what to fucking tell you. You guys are the same goddamn party post-Reagan as them, with some differences when it comes to who you put into place when it comes to judges and some jurisprudence and some social issues. No fucking doubt about it. But what people have to understand is you take a step enough back, far enough, and it's the same shit for some people, man. And so I think what's really disingenuous on both sides of this conversation are the people that don't recognize the differences between the parties within a domestic sense when you look at different states. But I think it's also really disingenuous not to recognize the horrific areas of overlap and how that can just fuck so many people, right? And a lot of linear minds have a hard time kind of balancing these kind of two truths and contradiction of sorts. And for me, more and more, it's becoming really apparent, and I think this has always been true, that Democrats really are a controlled opposition, right? And I think what people fail to understand is that doesn't mean that, like, being played like by some puppet master. What it means is that, for very good reason, overt fascist movements will target communists. They'll target anarchists, right? They'll target socialists. They'll target the progressives of their time, trade unions, right? Because these are groups that have teeth and actually try to fucking attack that shit. Liberalism has no teeth. Again, we've circled back to why does it have no teeth? Because it's predicated upon this like civility politics. Liberalism is the nice guy of politics. So when it comes to interpersonal relationships, we understand that the nice guy finishes last, but then apply that shit to politics at a more collective level and all of a sudden we don't fucking get it. I understand that scaling shit, it gets a little more complex, but at the most basic fucking level, that's how this shit works. Right? And then from a conflict resolution standpoint, you have something like Trumpism, which doesn't believe in, hey, a more passive lose-lose compromise or a more active win-win collaboration. MAGA is inherently competitive. Win-loss, we take the win, you take the loss no matter what. And then when you have something like liberalism, right, this agreeable fucking civility politics, which believes in fucking compromise, okay, so this lose-lose fucking conflict resolution frame has run into this fucking hyper-competitive conflict resolution frame, and it's gonna walk all the fuck over it every single day of the week. So don't really come to me in my fucking lives and talk to me about Kamala Harris and Joe Biden when I can suck it up and fucking vote for them and kill my fucking soul in that process. But you probably can't even offer a fucking day of direct action or any real kind of fucking talk against this shit in your day to day. You're probably real nice with your family and friends. So I don't really want to hear it. What the fuck have you given up? What's up, Trav? How you doing, man? Zionism is basically manifest destiny, man, right? 100%. Militaristic, um, divinely inspired, right? Appreciate the likes, by the way, guys. Also, if I could, for a second, plug myself, check out the Substack. The link is in the bio. Right there, I try and drop at least a couple pieces a week, especially recently. If you enjoy the lives, you'll probably like the writing. I like to give some poems and then a little more kind of like, think of like short papers, quick analysis on some shit. So, appreciate you guys being here. Back to the live. Also, if you got any comments, hit me. I'll try and bounce off you as always. I know I get a little bit ranty. Militant atheist, South Texas. All right, Nana, if you're still here, I got a question. What do you guys think? I want to ask some people. And I want to preface this. I'm an agnostic atheist. But what do you guys think when you hear the word spirituality? Spirituality. Is it a negative, positive, neutral? It means something to you? Where does your mind go when you hear someone say spirituality? I know you're kind of limited by the comment section there, but I just want to get people's kind of thoughts because it's something I've been talking about a lot with some friends recently. We've been having some good, heated, fun debates about it because it does mean something so different to people, right? So we got, I'm a spiritual agnostic from Cookie. That's kind of, Austin's neutral on it, all right? Thanks to the like, Carnage. White supremacy, mostly recovery. So authority, when you hear spiritual, you think of white supremacy mostly or recovery. That's probably like Christian hijackery of it, I'd say, right? Because Christians have definitely hijacked spirituality in our society, no doubt about it, whether one believes in it or not. I'm pagan, so spirituality is about having, I'll see what you say to follow up there, Justin. Positive for you, Trav. Spirituality equals religion. I immediately ignore Farrakali. Music, I don't do church. Fair. So, okay, so that's interesting, right? So for a lot of people, I'm already seeing it, when you hear spiritual, and for good reason, oftentimes because of their lived experience and people they encounter and just what fucks this country so often, is there's like this spiritual is religion. And I think this is tough because I don't think that in theory that should be the case, but maybe religions hijack spirituality to such a point that maybe spirituality is a dead term. But I think a big problem that we have, like take Marxism and take communist movements or liberation movements or anarchist movements, I think that oftentimes there's this great understanding of the economic pillar, the social pillar, and the political pillar, right? And how capitalism and our constitutional republic, right, kind of facilitates a lot of these things, at least within the United States of America, right? But I think what's often missed is this myth of secularism, right? We have this idea, especially in the West, that we're secular, but we so obviously fucking aren't, right? So I know people will say things like, oh, the United States of America is not founded on Judeo-Christian beliefs, but like, that's a lie. Quite obviously, this shit is founded upon Judeo-Christian beliefs. And I don't mean that like in a positive way. I mean that in a quite obviously negative fucking way. But because you have that thing in the First Amendment that talks about the Establishment Clause, right? There's this idea that we actually have separation of church and state. You can fucking say it, but if most of the motherfuckers running the show are white cis male Christians, right? And then their decision making is informed by their fucking perspective and interpretation on their fucking God. Like, it doesn't matter what the fuck people say. Quite clearly, our decision making functions have been hijacked by a bunch of motherfucking Christian nationalists and always have been, right? It's just to what fucking degree. And we're living in a time where it's to a greater degree again, it seems, right? So I think secularism is a bit of a fucking lie that we tell ourselves. And maybe I'm wrong on that. But I think that if we ignore this spiritual pillar, and I don't know what to fucking call it, I don't want to use a word that gets people to be like so like justifiably kind of like have a negative reaction against it, because we know how horrific and traumatic religion can be, especially in our country. But I've been kind of playing with like words and like what are dead terms, right? What are some words that we just know trigger these super emotional reactions from people, right? Fair or not, and like maybe just better off not using if we really want to get people to the conclusions we're trying to help them reach. So paganism is about your lived experience. It's how everything is holy. To me, being spiritual is. Yeah, I used to fight for the idea of separation of church and state. It doesn't really exist. It's kind of how I feel authority. Let's talk about anarchism next. We can, maybe that'd be alive, because for me, I've always kind of, I don't know, anarchy, communism. It'd be a good conversation. There's people who know more than me, man, on that topic. So, David, I hope for God forgive you on your bedside. See what's interesting about that is you don't actually hope that, bro. Because like if you really like believed in God and like you probably believe like in Jesus Christ then, and like this idea of love thy neighbor, right, and like connectedness and like aid, like that's a strange way to fucking behave and talk if you're trying to be Christ-like, right? And so that's why people are really turned off by religion, because of really fake disingenuous shit like that, right? So maybe represent your people better, bro, and we'll be more receptive. What's up, Gregory Puff? Nice name. Appreciate that, man. Maybe instead of destroying Tesla dealerships, church is a better idea. There is a conversation, Callie, about maybe where to direct some of that energy. Priestess. I am a priestess. It's a verb, not a noun. From just another human. I feel like America's always wanting to be these great things that it clearly is not, right? Yeah, America the Great, America the Bold, America the Beautiful. All a fucking marketing job, right? It's none of these things. Not to say you can't find moments that are positive, but like, to what end, right? So, yeah, like Shai said, appreciate the likes, guys. Thank you. Thank you. And again, check out the Substack, links in the bio. Be putting out some regular content there. Some decent shit, if I may say so. Yeah. I think Substack's the play in the future anyways, man. I think we only have so much time on TikTok. It's already a different atmosphere, right? Post-election, post kind of a one-night blackout, right? So I think that if you have communities, if you have creators, if you have like people that you enjoy, you should be trying to get to Discord, you should be trying to get to Substack, you should be trying to get to maybe a little bit cleaner spaces while still using these spaces to bring people in, right? I'm not saying abandon them. I'm just saying recognize there might be a fucking clock on this shit, right? So, the latent, holier than thou, in this chat, right? Travel. It's always good stuff. I mean, I'm never like, especially like on a public platform where basically, I'm pretty careful with like what I would promote. But I'm not going to condemn or not promote certain things. I'm just not going to get up here and say it, bro. Like, because it's inappropriate for me, and it's just dangerous. But we're in a different time, so diversity of tactics is a beautiful thing, and I'll leave it at that. But people should just understand what they're doing, understand consequences, be prepared for that shit. And then think about the ripple effect of how your actions can impact the people around you and really consider that shit before people do shit, So, yeah, I like Substack, Amy. I enjoy it. And I found that it feels, and I don't want to be like that elitist douchebag, but it feels like a little bit more of like an intellectual space in some ways. I find some interesting perspectives and takes on there that I don't think I would find on like more traditional social media now. So I think Substack's got a lot of potential, right? You got the posts, you got the notes, there's a live function, you can put your podcast there, which I think is pretty fucking cool. So I think they're building long term. I think it's shown a pretty good understanding of just the mass media climate, the media climate in general, and where the tech's kind of heading with people. So going back to the topic of Zionism, Herzl was a secular agnostic. So just further proves it was political. Thanks, Cookie. So like Cookie says, so going back to the topic of Zionism, right? Herzl, which is someone who was considered kind of like the godfather of Zionism by many, right, was a secular agnostic. So just further proves that it was a political project that has slowly over time been conflated with religious elements and things like that. But it's always been a subtler colonial project, and I wouldn't say always. It's always been, yeah, always. I mean, fuck, what's the purpose of trying to parse that out, right? So appreciate that, Cookie. Good point. Yeah, so remember, Thursday night we're going to talk part 2, kind of 1947 and on. Because I think even in 30 minutes, you can't really do a history of this shit, man. Like, I was going to talk a little bit more about Judaism, but I'm like, bro, what the fuck do I say about almost 4,000 years of history with 30 minutes with you guys when it's not an area that I'm super well versed in, right? So it's like, oh, how do you summarize that up, right? Only politics moves the needle. Otherwise, it's just rabble rousing. Austin. See if I missed any comments. People always need food. That's a fact. God bless capitalism. So do you have a Discord in the works? My concern with the Discord is that I think a lot of us understand just like that shit just, not always, right? There's some cool groups and people and stuff, but like a lot of the time that just becomes messy. So if it's something that happens and it's in the works, it would need to make sure that it has like a solid infrastructure, right? Clear kind of goal, and would kind of like have some ways to kind of mitigate and avoid, let's just be honest, the silly fucking drama that seems to infect these things. Because I'm not gonna fucking babysit adults, bro. I'm just not doing that shit. Like, no offense, I don't like most of you guys enough to do that shit, right? I got my people that I love and I'll work through and hold accountable and stuff, but like, Like it's something I've been really trying to kind of like really take to heart, is that like accountability really is meant for in the community, right? If someone's outside the fucking walls of like your people, like how the fuck am I going to hold them accountable, really, right? I'm not saying there's not ways you could, but it just becomes much harder, and it might not even be your place necessarily. It depends on what's going on, how that impacts you, all this shit, right? There's nuance to that. But yeah, it's I don't just want to fucking create some fucking space that becomes toxic and just, creates more problems than helps. So just trying to make sure we're good before that goes. Running a Discord is, yep. Thank you, Rhonda. Free Palestine, absolutely. Always. Religious folks can say a lot, but it doesn't really matter until it affects the country. Um, yeah, I mean that's kind of, and that's kind of why it's really disingenuous sometimes. I think to like try to separate these things, right? To separate spirituality, to separate economics, to separate politics, to separate the social. Like these things are all intertwined. You can analyze them on their own, but like okay, now you got to go back and apply them, and they all intersect and impact one another, and they all draw from like the same foundation. Um, so it's like yeah, bro. Like, so, like, it's like great. We've deconstructed capitalism. We're anti-capitalist, but there's still something more, and that's this individualism, right? Um, like something we've been talking a lot about with our friends in our group is just like this idea, and a lot of people talked about this. It's not like that we created some fucking concept here. A lot of people in history have talked about this. A lot of people right now are talking about this, right? When you start to break down kind of just what is it to be collective, what is it to be individualistic, and what are the values attached to this shit, and what do those values look like? All of a sudden, even with a collective framing and with an individualistic framing, a word like freedom means something different in both these fucking lanes and in both these perspectives, and in both of these value structures, right? And so I think like there's this idea that like of like in our society in the USA of like rugged individualism, right? Of like pulling yourself up by your bootstraps, of like if you just work hard enough you can accomplish anything. And it's like, all right, pause, motherfucker, because now all of a sudden we're telling a story, we're creating a myth that just does not fucking operate and connect with who we are, and most importantly does not align with who we are as a species. Because at our core there might be three fucking facts about humans, and we're gonna keep on hammering this shit. We're not like rugged, individualistic, like do it on your own motherfuckers, right? We are a hyper collective species. I don't know about you guys, but when I popped out the womb, I definitely needed some help for a long time. Like I still need some help. I like always need help. So this idea that you're like separated from the herd that like facilitates like the connection, like facilitates some of the best outcomes that we see, and this idea that you could place yourself above, right? It is just fucking wild work. So if you think about the fact that all of us pop out the womb, we cry for help, right? The very first necessary act of humanity is a cry for help. The very second act is a fucking choice, right? Someone's got to respond to that cry, or they can walk away. You don't got to respond to it. But if you walk away, that spells death for the individual. And long term, that mentality leads to inevitable collapse, unsustainability, and death for the species, right? For the group as a whole. And so the first corruption, the first sin, if we call it, Christianity, right? The first fucking fundamental human error is to place yourself above the group, right? It is individualism. It is this idea that you are more important. No, dude, no individual is more important than the fucking group. That's just not how it works. Sorry, not fucking sorry, right? So for the people that respond to that cry for help, and we see it every day in our life, right? There are people who respond to the cry for help, and there's people that don't think they have any obligation, right? The people that respond, they find duty and meaning in the collective, right? And the problem is we probably live in a world, right, through capitalism, imperialism, colonialism, feudalism, right, the intersection of Christianity and the Roman Empire, which creates this kind of centralized, hierarchical, fucking top-down religion, right, that wants to expand and take and then project its worst onto the world and then fucking invert reality in its favor, right? When you look at this shit, like, great, so we got rid of capitalism. We still got to get rid of the underlying individualism, right, that's promoted through all these fucking iterations of the economy, we'll call it. So yeah, sorry, it's kind of ranting there. Let me get back to comments. Nice, Forrest. Maybe we'll have to talk, man. Because I feel like some of your videos I've seen are kind of hinting at some of this shit. So thank you, Annie. I appreciate that. Austin, rugged individualism, exactly what capitalism needs to see, caste system. And that's why all these different pillars of intersectionality are so important, right? Like, I know there's different things. Like, I understood the racial pillar and the misogynistic pillar a lot fucking faster once I started to deconstruct than I understood the pillar of ableism, right? That's probably where I'm still really working. There's things I say every day where I'm like, fuck, that's probably ableist, right? I gotta kill that from the vocabulary and be better. So that's been a really difficult one for me. But that's why it's like, And like my friends say, and they're right, it's like, yo, if you're not like constantly deconstructing and open to the fact that you're probably messing up, you already messed up, right? This shit's so deeply embedded in us. Like remember, the methods of propaganda, these ideas, the engineering to kind of manufacture this society, it's existed like long before we ever popped up, right? These things are pretty effective for worse, right? So we should be a little humble in how we try to attack this shit. That doesn't mean we shouldn't, right? It just means, man, at the end of the day, like, so I want to get back actually to those facts of human nature, right? So if we're gonna like get rid of individualism, we're a hyper collective species, right? Like, obviously, human nature is communication. Like, we got to communicate, we got to share information, we got to swap that shit so we can work together or not work together, right? And for better or worse, how we talk, that creates your kind of communication, your information climate, right? And that could be positive, that could be negative. Positive is going to be supportive, right? Negative is going to usually be fucking competitive in some form, right? And now we're back to those words: competitive, supportive, compromise to collaboration, right? And so even how you talk is going to frame tension, it's going to frame conflict, it's going to frame how you try to approach that shit. So something that's important to remember, it's not without reason that you live in a society that's so great at commodifying shit and there's only one word for love. You love your Dr. Pepper the same as you love your mama, I'm sure, right? So, so remember, we're doing 2 lives a week right now, same time, Sunday nights, 6 o'clock Pacific, 9 o'clock Eastern, and then we're here on Thursday nights, 6 o'clock Pacific, 9 o'clock Eastern. On Thursday, we're going to kind of hit part 2, and we'll talk about, today was a little bit more about just kind of Zionism in general, and we didn't get too much pushback in the comments, so it was pretty easy to get through. Thursday night will be a little bit more about Israel itself, kind of more post-1947, and really applying shit that's our fucking lifetimes, man, right? There are people that have been alive through all this, so this ain't some ancient fucking history, right? And we'll kind of kill the complexity of this, because it's not a complex situation. There's a few things that are complex about it, but there's a lot of it that's it's not complex at all. It's basic fucking morality. Either you got it or you don't. And if you don't, you probably got to ask yourself, what are the barriers, right, that are impeding you from recognizing the most documented genocide in human history for what it is, right? Like, so, and that's what's really difficult right now, right, is in this moment in time, how someone reacts to the most documented fucking genocide of all time tells you exactly who the fuck they are for all terrible things within history on some level. Because if you can't even recognize this shit for what it is, I know exactly who you would have been within these societies. No doubt about it. There ain't no fucking debates, right? Things like COVID, things like reactions to George Floyd, things like Trump 2.0, things like the genocide of Israel with U.S. support, right? With U.S. sponsorship, with U.S. fucking green light, really highlight the fucking just character of humans, right? And again, I'm not saying that being on the right side of these conversations means you're a good person, right? Because we still got to make sure that what we observe and what we talk about is matched with our actions. But if you don't even get it in terms of your observation or your words, your actions are certainly fucked. There's no doubt about that, right? So I really appreciate you guys being here tonight. This has actually been a really good live. Again, we're going to be back Thursday night, 6 o'clock Pacific, 9 o'clock Eastern. We'll be talking about the part 2. Tonight was a little bit about Zionism, right? Just trying to kind of separate Zionism from Judaism, right? And Thursday night we'll talk about Israel a lot more in depth and just kind of what that's looked like in these last few generations, right? So I hope you all have a great night. Please check out the Substack. The link is in my bio. If you go check out the bio on the TikTok page, I think there's some decent shit there. I'm trying to kind of post more there. And if there's anything you want me to write about, hit me up. Let me know. In the comments. If you don't like it, I'll try and even respond to it if I can. So appreciate you guys being here. Everyone have a great night, and remember to mute the media. Appreciate you guys being here. Everyone have a great night, and remember to mute the